It's time for the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast coming at you on IdahoSports.com, where we break down District 1 and 2 activities week in, week out in this great state called Idaho. My name is Brandon Baney. This guy is Ryan Scaggs, our North Idaho resident and expert. What's up, Ryan?
Expert's a loose term. I choke on my coffee. It started a little bit stronger than I thought it was.
We're off to a great start. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm gonna rescind that expert title.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Sorry, my phone blew up on me for a second. I had to
I thought I had frozen up again or something. You know, I don't have too many tabs open in the background, but I am uploading another Prepcast episode, and so sometimes that kind of sucks all the juice out of my CPU. Anyways,
that was me glitching out for a second. So
okay.
Yeah. Anyways,
we're oh my god, this is the best start to a show in history. I mean, we're crushing it.
Yeah, recovering from my wife's birthday yesterday, and it's Thanksgiving and having the relative comatose still hangover of Thanksgiving and food and desserts and all that stuff. So yeah.
Cool. Happy birthday to the missus.
Yeah, it was Abby's birthday yesterday. So if you're listening, which I doubt she is right now, she's probably at work and she's got better things to do than listen to me flap my gums. So there's a lot going on. I mean, things are bumping. I know that you're grinding in the background on a whole bunch of different things. You talked about tabs being open, but I think you've got some mental tabs open with all of the previews and everything else going on in North Idaho and around state too. So yeah. You're a busier man.
That's a good way to start, because there is a lot going on at IdahoSports.com as we're kind of changing the decor, right? We're going from fall sports to winter sports. We are giving one last, look back at the fall sports season, though. Yesterday we presented our list of the all-conference boys and girls soccer teams, as well as the all-conference volleyball teams. Now, these are all of the ones that have been reported to us. Not every league does an all-conference team. Most of the ones up north do. And so we've got all of those for soccer and volleyball. Where's football at? Everyone's asking. I'm still working on it. By the end of the week or this weekend, we should have all those all-conference football teams from around the state.
I think I was the first one to release a list, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll
right.
take precedent for that one. That I'll pat myself on the back for doing my homework early. But yeah.
And I will say, Ryan, I have put in the Inland Empire League teams, at least so far, 5A, 4A, and a lot of similarities to your all North Idaho 9, which means either the coaches listen to this show, which some do, but I don't think it influences them. But the other thing is probably the talent was really apparent this year.
Yeah, I'm really good at stating the obvious. Yeah, that's pretty much how it turned out to be. So, plus it's a list combining two different lists combining three classifications. So there will be some blaring omissions and some probably that show up that may not get looked at just due to overly loaded conferences. But by and large, I mean, I think that list was pretty reflective of how great the seasons were respectively in a lot of the classifications in North Idaho.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what else is going on at IdahoSports.com? Well, of course, girls basketball coverage is off and running. We have got probably 95% of the scores in from the start of the season until now. It's pretty much one of, if not the most accurate, breakdowns of where you're going to be able to find all that info. Most nights we get about 90% of the scores in, and then I always the next day go back and start shaking people down for, hey, I need this score, because we try to have it all the way updated by midday every day. So if you're looking for the latest scores, standings, girls basketball, boys basketball, it's all at IdahoSports.com. Our first coaches poll of the year for girls basketball was released this week. Ryan, we can talk about that briefly, but also I know a staple of the North Idaho Prepcast is your North Idaho 9. Somebody just rang my doorbell. This is going to be really fun. Hang tight. We'll be back in just a second here.
Best Prepcast ever.
And welcome back to the North Idaho Prepcast. One of the new fun features we have here on the North Idaho Prepcast is the ability to pause as we're recording. We didn't have that in the olden days. That's a new feature here for season 3. So when somebody comes to my door and rings the doorbell, instead of me having to go attend to it and you awkwardly trying to fill the time, we can just hit that pause button and come back like nothing ever happened. So
yeah, didn't have to play the elevator music.
yeah, right. Stand by. Technical difficulties. Yeah, we did some Black Friday shopping, of course, for ourselves, right? We got gifts for everybody else too, but it's always nice to buy yourself a present. We got one of these dual vacuum mop things. We got a lot of hardwood floors at our house, and we have 2 dogs. Okay. And so naturally they get pretty dirty and slobbery. And so
get all the puppy glitter on the floor. Yeah. You can do some fun games with those vacuums, by the way. If you get more than one, you can there's some games you can play with them, like battle bots type stuff. But I've been seeing some reels come through that have actually been pretty entertaining. I saw somebody attach knives to a Roomba and then put a bunch of balloons, and they kind of built like a space around it. And then they had like a game of whoever had the last balloon left before the Roomba popped it, like won a prize or whatever. And so they were like taking bets and stuff like that. And you had I don't know. There's like a lot of degenerate betting going on with Roombas and balloons, but I thought it was kind of an interesting, funny way of doing something, but like for a game. But yeah. Anyways, I digress. But yeah, Black Friday, there was actually some really good deals out there that I partook of a couple. I mean, mostly I usually do it for Christmas decor and Christmas lights because usually they're as cheap as they get Black Friday weekend. So yeah, I don't know if you're going to label this Prepcast degenerate gambling or not. But
no, Roombas and balloons. That's what we're gonna go with.
Gotcha.
There's too much to unpack there in everything you just said. I'll just briefly say I don't have that kind of time to set up my Roomba with knives and attach them. And I need my Roomba to actually, clean things, not provide entertainment.
Well, my sister has a Roomba, and she had a dog with incontinence issues. So beware there, because that creates a whole different type of awful mess.
It's like when I throw spaghetti at the wall, except it's not.
Yeah, it looked like the semi truck had to hit the Jake brake. Yeah.
Oh man. So every once in a while on the North Idaho Prepcast, we have a show where we just kind of screw off basically. And we just there's some sports talk, but there's really a lot of just random stuff in there too. And so if you came here looking for some hard-hitting analysis this week, I'm really sorry. It's looking like it's looking like this is going to be one of those shows where we don't actually get to much. But
get interrupted by a doorbell. I'm not paying attention, like looking at my phone. It's like Thanksgiving all over again. Yeah.
I mean, we're 8 minutes in now, and we have talked about Black Friday, coffee, Roombas attached with knives, and
previews. Yeah,
that's right. All conference teams, continuing the through line of what is at IdahoSports.com. We also have our girls basketball previews, of course. Those have been up for a couple of weeks. We are working on our boys basketball previews as well. We'll be working on those through the end of the week and the weekend. By Monday, all of the previews should be up on the site at IdahoSports.com. And then wrestling coverage, of course. Al Fontes is working on an exhaustive preview with a lot of data and a lot of shout outs to a lot of good wrestlers. But it takes them a long time to put it together. So in 2 weeks, so not this upcoming week, but the week of December 11th, our big season preview for high school wrestling will be up on the site as well. I know the wrestling season started last night with a couple of duels and some smaller things. And then also along those same lines, our standalone wrestling prepcast, the Matt Chat Prepcast, is coming back for season 2, baby. We are going to record it every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Pacific time. on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel and Facebook page. We encourage all of the fans to tune in, and because really the fans are the ones who drive the conversation. And so that'll be every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Pacific time. Actually, scratch that, 7 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Mountain time on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel and Facebook page. And then we'll take that audio and put it into your podcast feed the following day. But yeah, the Matt Chat Prepcast is back starting next Tuesday, December 5th. That'll be our debut show.
Sweet. And that's a great podcast or Prepcast, I should say, that I think is underrated in our lineup because it only comes through like for a season, and then it kind of disappears obviously during the fall and spring sports season. But there was a lot to talk about wrestling in the state of Idaho and what took place in the off season, including that national team title at Fargo. That was incredible. So Al does such a phenomenal job with the write-ups and everything that he does. I don't think there's another outlet in the state of Idaho that covers wrestling necessarily like we do with the outlets that are available. So that's just a testament to the efforts from Al and you and the other guys around that do the Prepcast. You guys do a phenomenal job, and it's definitely, I know the wrestling community in North Idaho definitely gets involved, and they definitely appreciate it.
I really don't do much with it. I just kind of surrounded myself with really smart, knowledgeable people. Al, I mean, we got really lucky with Al. I mean, he lived in California for years and years and years and did this, but in California, and he just happened to retire to Boise. And so it's been just a perfect arrangement. But Al does a phenomenal job, certainly. And so, yes, wrestling coverage is on the way soon at IdahoSports.com as well. And also this year, we're bringing back the rankings, team rankings, individual rankings. It's an exhaustive process. And just remember, it's not personal if you think your kid should be ranked higher. It's all just a starting point and fun to talk about.
It really doesn't matter. I mean, until you get to state, it doesn't matter. So like, what really matters is the podium finish at the end of the year. So, I mean, I think, good kids get to be seen as good kids. And, we all know that a lot of the majority of recruiting takes place in the summer at Fargo and other tournaments too. So, I mean, it is what it is. I think parents just love to hear their kid's name called. We found that out with that all North Idaho team for football, and the other sports that I've done it for in the past is usually my messages blow up for a few days after putting that out. And people just like to hear their kids mentioned. And, there's nothing wrong with that. So, but like I said, that Prepcast and the wrestling in the state of Idaho being as strong as it is, I think it's never been stronger than it is now. And that's definitely showing, and it's getting better. There's the scary part. We'll talk more about it at length, especially as some of the bigger, more prominent tournaments like Tri-State are going to come up and coming. But we'll talk about it more. I think on as far as regional Prepcasts go, more on this show than we do on maybe some of the others. But it's just because I'm a wrestling dude. But yeah. So, anyways, I digress. But you guys just keep up the good work and definitely tune into that Prepcast. It's a great listen.
Yep, for sure. All right. Girls basketball, we talked about the first coaches poll of the season is out. I'm going to break it down 5A, 4A, 3A, and then we'll go 2A, 1A, D1, 1A, D2. Okay. And then I'll give you one team because otherwise we'll be here for 3 hours. I'll give you one team to talk about. Okay. So 5A, Lake City is number 1 in the first coaches poll of the year. Well earned. They're off to an undefeated start. They went down and swept the Boise schools, including Big Bad Boise High, who is number 2 in the poll. Coeur d'Alene checks in at number 3. I got no qualms with that. Lake City, Boise, Coeur d'Alene, to me, just based on the on-court results, that's a pretty clear 1, 2, 3. 4A, Sandpoint checks in at number 3 in the poll, and you might be thinking, geez, the defending champs only at number 3. Well, they've only played 1 game, and so all the others have played 3 or 4. I expect that will even out as Sandpoint gets more games under their belt. 3A, Ryan, you've got Timberlake checking in at number 2, only behind Snake River, the team they lost to in the championship last year. Give me one team that you want to break down here.
Let's talk about Timberlake. I really do like the Tigers a lot. And, everybody talks a lot about the 5A teams, and we talked at length about Coach Love's team at the end of last year. But let's talk about the Tigers, because I really think that this team could be primed for a very, very, we saw them play in the championship game last year, but we realistically could see them hoisting the blue trophy at the end of this year with that roster that they've got back.
Yeah, so it's really fascinating because Matt Miller, I mean, just
He's
is
a great coach, man. Great coach.
I mean, they have won 4 state titles in school history in girls hoops. They've all been since 2016. So just in the last, not even 10 years is when they've done all this winning. Now, they do return a lot of talented players like Josie MacArthur and Peyton Young and Lucy Simpson, who's gotten off to a great start this year inside the paint. They did lose some pretty significant pieces, Ryan, and in 3 totally different ways. They lost Sierra Sumas to graduation. She was a really good defensive player. They lost Malia Miller, the North Idaho Player of the Year and Coach Miller's daughter, to an injury.
Yeah,
they're maybe hoping she can come back at the very end, but she's going to be out for a significant amount of time. And then they lost their best shooter on the team, Jenna Chase, because she decided to not play this year. So you've lost a player to graduation, injury, and just saying, I don't really want to play this season.
But at the same time, you look at the depth that was there within that team too, and the players that have stepped up. I would say if Miller is able to come back at the end of the year, this team could be a rock solid favorite for a state championship. I just think that there's so much talent on this team. It's a team that doesn't get talked a lot about in North Idaho because of what we saw with the likes of the Vikings and, Sandpoint and Lake City and Post Falls is what they've been in the last few years as well. Kind of quietly under the radar. And I think Coach Miller kind of likes it that way. But they're just a gritty team. They play super hard. They play up on their schedule too. They schedule tough, which definitely helps them, come state tournament time. But that's a team that, if Malia's not able to come back, I still think that they've got a lot of talent on that roster. They're more of I don't want to say a whole team, but I look at you look at the cohesive unit that's on the floor. There's more strength in numbers this year. I think, they're going to have to be better as a complete team. They're not going to have the single games where, Sierra Sumas just takes over and puts up, 17 and 6-8 boards, whatever. But that it's going to be a lineup that's going to have to be tested, but I think that they're going to be able to weather the storm throughout the season. We look at, Bonners Ferry's getting better too. There's going to be a little bit of a push, but in a 2-team conference, it's going to be tough that, to say that our conference schedule really pushed us, but they schedule up. And that's the one thing I think that they try to hang their hat on is we're playing the 4As regularly. We're playing, the who's who of the 2A schools. We're trying to play up and play some of those Spokane teams as well. And it benefits them as the state tournament time comes along.
Yeah, for sure. So I think Timberlake's going to be just fine. At the same time, I also acknowledge Snake River is also very, very good, and they return pretty much everybody except their posts from last year. So I in my personal rankings, if we ever do a media poll for basketball, I think I would rank Snake River 1, Timberlake 2, and I probably wouldn't change that outside of a really weird loss, or it may not get settled until state because they're so far apart from each other. But it'll be really interesting for sure. So yeah, we talked about Timberlake and the start they've gotten off to. They are undefeated. And if my computer could ever load, I could tell you who they've actually beaten. They're 3-0 to start the year with wins over Genesis Prep, Lakeland, and West Valley High School from Washington. The Lakeland win is good. Lakeland is a really good team. In fact, talking to Will Love, the Sandpoint coach, he said, look, Lakeland was one of the 8 best teams last year in girls 4A basketball. They could have went to state and really made some noise. Unfortunately, one bid league. So the win over Lakeland's good. The win over G Prep is what it is. And then I don't know, is West Valley good from
West
Washington?
Valley's usually pretty strong. I mean, usually historically they've been all right. That GSL is a good conference, and that you've got some good teams that are talented within that league between West Valley, Clarkston, Shadle Park. There's some good teams that are over there in that conference in the Greater Spokane League in Washington. So that's a win. I think you look at you're playing a Spokane school with an enrollment over 1,000 kids. That's a good win.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was double checking on. So that's your 5A, 4A, 3A breakdown. In the 2A and 1A polls, Ryan, Grangeville is the number one team in the 2A girls coaches poll. Lapway is the number one team in the 1A D1 poll. And then Kendrick is the number one team in the 1A D2 poll. And Deary also sneaks in at number 5. So which of these first place teams in the coaches poll do you want to talk about here?
Oh, let's talk Grangeville. I know that there's a lot of movement that's happened at Lapway in the off season. But yeah, let's talk about that Bulldogs team, because I liked them coming out of the state tournament last year. I know that they didn't get necessarily a huge finish from the state tournament last year, but there was a ton of pieces. They were young last year, and they've got a great coach. They're returning a whole lot in that lineup. They're gonna have a great season. I really look at the Bulldogs as being a force in the state of Idaho in 2A basketball this year, as far as on the girls' side.
Yeah. They return LaFay and Barger and Vanderwall and all of these really talented, dynamic athletes. To me, the question is who takes second. Early indications are that Kellogg is maybe that team. But, we will see, certainly. So, yeah. And then, big shout out to Lapway and Kendrick as well for breaking through and being the number one teams in the first poll of the season. Also, it's a good start.
Rankings are rankings, but you like to know that there's a litmus test out there that tells you kind of where you're at. And that's, the respect that comes statewide as far as what they've done early on. And, you want to talk about Lapway just briefly. You talk about your coach moving over, you have losing, quote unquote, a couple of your best players, moving with the coach over to Washington. But that team's reloaded, and, they're primed to make a big run in 1A D1 too. So,
yeah. And sorry, real quick, back to Grangeville. They're 3-0 with wins over Melba, Cole Valley Christian. Those are two teams that are going to be at state. And McCall Donnelly, a really good 3A team. Now, Cole Valley Christian, the game was tight, 66-62 win for Grangeville. I would love to see those two teams rematch at state.
And they could. Yeah. And then Melba wins big too. That's a big win also.
Yes. Melba's the defending champs, right? So, great start to the year for Grangeville and Coach Michelle Barger's crew there.
She's such an unsung, great coach in the state of Idaho too. I know that in the coaching circle, she gets a lot of notoriety, but it's somebody in the press that doesn't necessarily get a lot of, I think, kudos of what she's done down there. She's done a really solid job with that program. And you look at, like you said, you talked about the pieces with that Grangeville team, beating who they've beat early on. I could see them being a rematch, whether it's in the semis or however things shake out in the seeding with Cole Valley and with Melba. I realistically think that they could see those two teams in the state tournament. And they're going to have to go toe-to-toe with them in order to get that blue trophy. But this is a Grangeville team that looks primed, kind of like they had the run in the late, 2009, 10, 11, 12, kind of in that range. I know that they had a period of time where they were super deep and loaded. This is a team that kind of looks eerily similar to those teams.
Yeah, for sure. So way to go, Grangeville. I did also want to mention last night we had the first kind of rivalry game of the year in girls hoops, Lewiston and Moscow. They played in the Bears Den. The Bear Den in Moscow. Lewiston got snuck out of there with a 51-48 win. Both of these teams are working in new head coaches this year, and I guess I didn't know that. I knew Coach Fisher at Lewiston was new this year. I did not realize Moscow had made a coaching change. Josh Colvin is now coaching the Moscow girls. So
I didn't know they had made a coaching change either. But I did see Moscow sneak into the getting votes too. On the coaches poll. So that was something to keep an eye on with that Bears team. But I think the IEL 4A is going to be pretty balanced this year as far as what they've got talent returning. That's going to be a pretty decent conference to keep your eye on between those three teams. Obviously, we know about Sandpoint, but we're kind of bouncing around classification-wise. But I think it's going to be a little more balanced than we've seen in years past. Yeah,
and Moscow, their point guard is McKenna, but nobody calls her McKenna. They all call her by her nickname Punk. So it's one of my favorite, names out there too. Punk, not for For Moscow. So anyways, all right, boys basketball quickly. The season is just kind of getting started here, Ryan. We do have a couple of tournaments coming up this weekend that we'll talk about. But first, last night, some coaches will text me, their scores. Some send them in via email. I got a notification from Jared Young, the Wallace boys basketball coach, last night. Hey, we played the Timberlake JV. We got a nice victory, 71-52, the final. And then he sent me the box score, right, with all the stats. And as I'm looking at it, I'm like counting them up, and I'm like, wow, Julian Davis came out and had a great contest. He was named to your All North Idaho football team. He was an excellent, 6'3" receiver for the Miners football team this fall. And he comes out in his season debut, Ryan, double, 10 rebounds, which is impressive, right? 38 points.
Yeah.
He's
I don't care who
filling it
you're
up.
playing. Like, you score 38 in a high school basketball game. That's you're putting up buckets, and that's a great job by him. He's going to have himself a whale of a season. And I think that he's going to keep them in the conference conversation this year. Obviously, you've got the defending state champs in your league, but have yourself a night. Like, that's a great job coming out of the gates for that Wallace team. And there's it's going to be a fun season. I look at a lot of these teams. There's some balance in North Idaho that we haven't seen necessarily in a few years. And, there's going to be some big names out there for each team, each of these individual teams, not even just stating like we've talked about historically with like Lake City last year or whatever. You look at this, we're going to have more complete teams, I think, in North Idaho this year than we've had in probably a few years as far as balance of powers and everything else. Because 5A looked really good last night in the North, and then you look at some of the smaller schools like Lakeside ended up getting a win last night over Post Falls JV too. So that North Star League is going to be kind of interesting to watch here in North Idaho.
So we are working on our boys basketball previews, right? We send a little preseason questionnaire to every coach, and I got the preview form back from James Anderson, the new Lake City boys coach, right? He had been coaching the girls previously. Mm-hmm. Coach Jim Winger retires after a long and distinguished career for Lake City, so now Coach Anderson's leading them. And one of the questions we ask is like, okay, offensively and defensively, where do you want to improve from last season? So we asked them on defense and then on offense. So under the offensive category, it's like, offensively, where do you want to improve this year? And he replied nowhere.
Because bring all those guys back that just graduated. Yeah.
Yeah.
But of note too, of scores that happened last night, I was keeping my eye on and kudos to the Bonners Ferry Herald up there. They do a great job keeping us in the loop as far as what goes on with athletics for the Badgers. Pushed last night by Genesis Prep. That's a Bonners Ferry team that finished as runner-up last year in 3A. And they got a push there. I think it was only a 2 or 3 point game at the half where Bonners Ferry late got a nice, I think it was a 17-4 run to put things away. But they were pushed the entire game by Genesis Prep, and they were paced by Williams. I think he had 17 in the ball game last night. But a good win to open things up for the Badgers in non-link play as well.
Yeah, so Bonners Ferry jumps out to a 29-10 lead over G Prep, and then G Prep outscores the Badgers 23-11 in that second quarter to make the halftime score 40-33. So only a 7-point game. And then I think Coach Williams probably had a good talk with his guys, and they came out. They ended up winning 73-48 the final. Bonners Ferry's 1-1, Ryan. And to me, the interesting game actually took place over the weekend. It was one of the first games of the season in Idaho boys basketball. We kind of had this couple of teams play on the opening weekend last week. I think the coolest game was Wendell and Declo played a neutral site game. Ryan, did you hear about this?
Mm-mm.
So we'll talk about this on the Magic Valley Prepcast this week if you want the full inside story. But Wendell and Declo played a neutral site game at the Delta Center where the Utah Jazz play.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
There's connections there or something. I don't know. That's two Idaho teams playing in Utah. That's awesome. But maybe they got tickets to the Jazz game with it too. That'd be super cool.
They did. They stayed and watched the Jazz. So the NBA was doing that little in-season tournament thing, which, by the way, I'm not a big fan of. But and each team has kind of painted their courts different colors for the in-season tournament. So the floor they played on was like purple. It was like Utah Jazz purple. It was pretty cool. So yeah, but up here in North Idaho, we had Coeur d'Alene play Bonners Ferry to get the season started, and close game. Coeur d'Alene wins 60-48, a 12-point win, but Bonners Ferry was right there. And you're talking about Coeur d'Alene overwhelmingly the favorite in the 5A IEL this year. And just based on what I've seen from other coaches talking about, Logan Orchard, the preseason favorite for player of the year in the IEL.
Logan,
also.
He's a great ball player. Caden Simmons, you've got other kids on that cast that are, we saw it last year where they played, I think it was 11 guys per game. They're going deep on their bench, but that's going to pay dividends this year because there's a whole lot of varsity experience on that lineup. And Logan Orchard, he's going to be one of the ball players to watch here in North Idaho this season. If we're going to stay talking 5A basketball too, I think, worth mentioning is Post Falls got a huge win over Central Valley last night from Spokane. That's a big win, getting a win over the Bears. So Post Falls is going to be, they're a team to be reckoned with. I think they're a dark horse necessarily in that 5A IEL. We'll break it down more when we do our season previews, but things could get interesting up north this year. I think the conference is kind of wide open as what we've seen the last 3 years in the 5A ranks.
Definitely. And that's a perfect transition here, Ryan, because Post Falls is competing in a weekend tournament here to start the season in boys hoops. We also have the Silver Valley tournament taking place this weekend over in Kellogg. Little 4-team affair with Kellogg and Wallace, of course. They always co-host. Wallace typically hosts one because they do the boys Silver Valley tournament and then the next weekend the girls Silver Valley tournament. So Wallace always hosts one, Kellogg hosts the other. They're both competing. Lakeside is coming down to play in this thing. I'd say they're the heavy favorites to win. And then a new school that just opened last year, Coeur de Christ, is going to play in this also. They're not an IHSAA school, but they are also going down to compete. So that'll be this weekend in Kellogg. And then also, Ryan, for the first time, there's like a little tip-off tournament taking place down in the Boise area.
Yeah.
It's called the Capital Classic. Capital High School is hosting it at Northwest Nazarene University, NNU, over there in Nampa. And we have 2 teams from the north going down to play in this thing. Post Falls and Lewiston, both making the trip south.
Yeah, no, that's, I think, something worth watching. I believe those games will be a broadcast on Idaho Sports, if I'm not certain. So fans will get a chance to see both those teams, those North Idaho teams, in action for free online. So that'll be a great opportunity to watch 2 teams. I look at, there's some question marks as far as what we know in North Idaho this year. I think it's anybody's conference. I really do. I know Coeur d'Alene's really good, but I look at this Post Falls team and some of the team pieces that they've returned. There is a lot of balance. There's a lot of grit with this team. They're a fun team to watch. For not having a quote unquote successful season last year, they were probably one of the funnest teams with a losing record to watch in the state last year, just based on how hard they play. It's kind of like the, I can't remember who it was. It was like the 40 minutes of hell or whatever they called it back in the day in college basketball. Yeah. And so it's real similar when you play that Post Falls team. They're just super gritty, in your face on defense, and then they'll just play hard. But, a year older, a little bit more mature. They got some more size inside. They can flat shoot. Tyrus Blake. There's guys to watch in that lineup that can light up the scoreboard on any given night. They got one of the better point guards in my mind in North Idaho. And that's just going to be a fun little, Neil McCarthy's he's a fun player to watch for the Post Falls team. So if you get a chance to tune into any of those games here on Idaho Sports at that Capital Classic, Lewiston's going to be a fun one to watch too, because there's so many unknowns, I think, around that team. They've got Rylan Gomez coming back. I know that we know that, but who else is going to contribute in that lineup for the Bengals? They can make some noise. They historically get some good players. So I know that I'm rambling a little bit, but that's going to be a good tournament to see kind of where the North sits statewide.
Yeah, Lewiston plays tonight against Ridgeview. Class 4A team that's got a really slick post player named Javante Bowles, who's a really fun player to watch. And they've got some decent guards. They'll play at 5 o'clock Mountain, so that's 4 o'clock Pacific. So if you're just like looking at the clock today at work and you're just looking to kill that last hour, you can check out Lewiston taking on Ridgeview on IdahoSports.com. Post Falls has the late game tonight, Scaggs, 7 p.m. tip Pacific time. They'll take on Big Bad Bishop Kelly. Now, they hosted Bishop Kelly last year in boys basketball, and BK snuck out of there. Or excuse me, Post Falls got the win. BK had a chance at a 3 as time expired, but they actually hit the 3 that would have sent the game into overtime, but they ruled that the shot came after the buzzer had sounded. So that was a game I was at on the call for on IdahoSports.com. So Post Falls will play Bishop Kelly tonight as well at 7 o'clock. In the other matchups, Bora will play Baker, Oregon. We know how good Baker is. Lapway played Baker last year and won on a last-second bucket. And then Capital and Blackfoot play today also. So
a great lineup that they've put together on a neutral site on a college campus. That's going to be a fun atmosphere and a definite, I think, very balanced field for that tournament too. There's going to be some good games.
Definitely. So again, if you want to tune into any of that coverage, you can do so by clicking on the Game Streams tab on the homepage at IdahoSports.com. All right. Well, this didn't start the greatest. The plane was wobbling as we took off, but hey, we managed to land this thing. We actually got quite a bit of actual, believe it or not, sports content into the show this week. I'm impressed.
It's not how you start, it's how you finish, Brandon.
That's right. And before we dig that hole any deeper, I'm going to just sign off here. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the North Idaho Prepcast. Enjoy the competition this weekend. Stay tuned to IdahoSports.com for boys basketball previews. Wrestling coverage will start up next week.
Froze up.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Yep. Okay. That's our cue. Ryan froze up. I don't know if I'm frozen up. We will just sign off here. Thanks for tuning in to the North Idaho Prepcast, everybody. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.